Good morning. Welcome to another Sunday morning sketch. This is Eric Whalen from Super Secret Project X. And this morning, not a very deep character, but a character that I enjoy. I'm going to do Miho from Girls und Panzer. Not the most brilliant series ever made. But I don't care. I enjoyed the heck out of it, and every single time I watch it, I giggle because cute teenage girls riding around in World War II era tanks somehow not killing each other as they fire at each other in a sanctioned high school tank combat sport. It ain't brilliant. I enjoyed the heck out of it. And she's also not like the deepest, most unbelievably well-designed character ever. I think she falls under the category of average anime girl number 997. I mean, she's kind of typical. But this morning I am somewhat on vacation, so I don't feel like doing anything hard. Darn it. I just feel like drawing a cute anime girl. And if you have a problem with that, tough, turn me off. But I am going to draw her, and may not even take that long, because, well, she's super simple. She is super simple. And she's going to allow me to draw her kind of big, and fill the page, and blah, blah, blah. And there we go. I just did a circle. Ta-da! Tell you what, it's been a long couple weeks. I'm so glad I've got this week off, because woo! I was starting to lose it a little bit. I'm not going to do her angry. I'm going to try to get that cute little look of concentration that she has. Yeah, I mean, it's not new. I know that whether the Japanese intended it or not, they have like a whole lot of like female empowerment stuff. I know it's kind of weird as that sort of sounds, but I mean, they've got, and I know it's usually because they want to show off the girls' panties and boobs and stuff. I mean, I'm not an idiot. I get it. But on the same note, you're seeing, like, girls do stuff that they're not typically known for doing, and that's one thing I liked about Girls und Panzer. These were, like, teenage girl, like, tank teams. I mean, it wasn't even done, well, it was done as a joke, but, I mean, they were, like, doing the jobs that you do in a tank. I mean, the radio girl was, like, the cell phone, like, messaging girl, and she was doing all the World War II era, like, radio stuff. I mean, that was kind of cool. I mean, it was meant in sort of the light-hearted way that the series was intended. Clearly meant for, like, you know, military fanboys. But, no, it was just cute. And just, you know. And it's funny, the historical, like, military jokes in it I thought was actually nice. I don't think a lot of people caught them, because I mean, unless you're like a military person, But there was like a lot of like military history jokes in it, which was so like unexpected for me because I'm a little bit of a military fan. I'm not like super huge. There's guys out there that like go and wear the helmets and march around and stuff. I just think the history's interesting. And they end up fighting a high school that was clearly based on the Russians. I mean, so clearly based. I mean, the high school's name was Pravda, and they were clearly all communist, and they were all using big Russian tanks and blah blah blah. But the funny thing was, is they ended up fighting them in a wintry tundra area, and the Russian, basically the Russian girls team, the Pravda group, cornered them in basically a warehouse during a winter storm, and kept them in there and waited for the winter weather to take them out. I mean, I was just, for anybody who doesn't know anything about the Russians, quite often they just let their local winter wipe out the invading army. That's during Stalingrad and all the stuff that the Nazis did going into Russia. The Russians fought hard with a lot of freaking tanks. But one of the really smart things that they did was they're like, oh no, that's, let the ice and snow take care of the Nazis. And so the main characters found themselves cornered in a warehouse in basically the middle of freezing winter while all the Russian characters were outside warm and toasty and just waiting for them to lose. It was silly and ridiculous. But it worked so well. Like when the American high school showed up, just called Sandy, and they were clearly all like, blondes and brunettes and, all kind of like rock and roll and that sort of stuff. They showed up with the most tanks of any high school, and that's what America, I think we still do, but what we really did in World War II was as we went in, and what were we, like 500 to 1? We completely outnumbered everybody. So when everybody else just had these, like the Germans would have these big nightmare tanks that they were just beautifully engineered and super dangerous, and we would just go after like one tank with like 10. So even though we would lose guys, we would completely swamp them. Everything we did was just swamping them. We had more resources than anybody else, basically. And that's what they did in the show, is the American team showed up and they had more tanks than everybody else. They had more ridiculous amounts of supplies than everybody else. They were just completely over the top. They just basically took everything that was basically historical stereotypes, and they put it into this anime show, completely out of nowhere. And it was kind of wonderful. Because these are not like history people like new things, but to people who are not military or history people, these were like, it's kind of like new stuff. And I was just sitting there sort of a military history fan, like just giggling because it was a silly series about cute teenage girls in tanks, and yet they were making like really serious historical and military references, and it was just kind of just awesome. Not that it was like a really deep series or anything. I mean, it was your classic run-of-the-mill, I think my friend Jim called it slice of life, because it was high school stuff until they get into their tanks, and then it was all tank combat, which was in really fun tank combat, like most of the time realistic tank combat. They weren't like rolling the tanks over and doing like silly stuff that you see in a lot of other anime shows. They were trying to stick as close to real tank combat as possible, with a couple exceptions, which just, and then they tried to do it in a fashion in which, was still realistic, but you were like, no, that doesn't happen. But it was okay because they were trying to honestly still stay within roughly the realms of general reality, ignoring the fact that it was a bunch of like squealing, giggling Japanese girls in tanks. not dying when they were getting shot by other tanks. You know, they'd get like dirty, or they'd like break a lens on their glasses or whatever. So I mean, you know, it was silly, but you just had these moments like they fought a German Moss, which is German for mouse. They only made like 3 of them, and I don't think they ever really saw a battle. But they're like a tank that is so big that the turret on the tank is the size of another tank. This is, I think they had like a crew of like 12 or 20 people or something. They were like battleships on land. They were ridiculous. They burned a gallon of gas every 20 feet. I mean, it was a moving building. I mean, and it, you know, that just fed into Hitler's obsession with giant military equipment. But they brought a Moss into the show, and it was the funniest, most ridiculous kind of. How do you take out this ridiculous tank when there is no historical record as to how you even fight these things? It was fun. I mean, it's the stuff that's brilliant about the show is not the stuff that is normal. It's the stuff that's normal is all the stuff, and it's that you normally see in anime, and that is it's incredibly normal in that way. And then you get into this like historically accurate kind of tank stuff, where all the girls turn into like military fanboys, and it's awesome in that way. You know, I mean, I think I made her forehead too big. Yeah, I did. And so the thing that I like about it is stuff that most people then just wouldn't care about. like I like tanks and like big industrial like equipment kind of a thing. So tanks really fall in underneath that very clearly. And so, like, under that, they were getting all geeky about, like, the engines and, like, the guns and the different modifications, and, like, they would get different teams, like the, like the Motorheads at the school, which was like it was 4 or 5 girls that worked on cars and that kind of thing. They got I think it was a Jag. Shoot, which was it? I'm forgetting the name of the tank. It was one of the Germans' big freaking Panzers. But it was a rare kind because they didn't make many because the engine kept like overheating and it kept breaking down and catching on fire and blah 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 because it was like too experimental. So basically what they did was they just put the motor pool girls into that tank, so whenever the dang thing was breaking down during combat, the like grease monkey girls would like jump out of their seats and start like repairing the engine during the fight. Totally ridiculous. Silly ridiculous. But funny and awesome in a equally ridiculous kind of way. You know, and yeah, I would say what they did right about the show was right. I would not be like, everybody needs to watch it. It's the best thing ever. I would not say that. I would say that if you're into this kind of thing, it's a great show. I would say that if you're not and you're curious, give it a watch because it's a little bit of an oddity because of the tank stuff. But beyond that, I'd be like, it's not for everybody. I mean, there's so clearly, like, without it getting perverse, there's clearly the fetish sort of stuff, you know. The military fetish with the uniforms, you know, the Japanese schoolgirl thing also with the uniforms, and all the classic cute girls, and blah, blah, blah. But there was, like, no harem stuff. It was just, there was very little romance or that kind of stuff. It was just, like, really a bunch of girls wanting to blow stuff up in tanks. And I just thought that that was kind of awesome. I'm trying to get this nose right. This nose is bugging me. This is what I get for yakking and trying to draw a little nose. Okay. And no, I am not going to do the character in this case. Her nose would just be like a little mark like that, which is super cute in the style, but I'm drawing how I want to draw, so I'm gonna try to give her a little teeny tiny nose. And it's not perfect. What I typically do while drawing is I'll get a detail down. Notice how I got a detail down. I get stuff down. And then I look at everything together. And there's no point finishing the eyes if I suddenly discover that the eyes are too big, for example. So I typically go in, like the ears on this character, you can't even see the ears. But I didn't spend 20 minutes drawing the ears. I just got the shapes in so I can feel how everything else goes together, and then I'll just erase it later because I won't need it. Okay. Maybe kind of get a little closer on the character there. So generally, what I get is once I get the face and the ears and the neck and stuff down, I can then spot what's wrong. Like, for example, the size of her head's a little too big. Then I can shave it down. And then just get rid of what I don't need. I discovered a long time ago that perfecting any one thing on a character before anything else is in place is one of the worst conceivable things, at least I can do. I think it's a bad thing for most people. I think there's like magic people out there that don't need to, like, they can just draw and everything just turns out right. I'm an imperfect creature. So I typically try to roughly get everything down softly. Don't spend too much time on any one thing, like I just spotted the neck was too thick. I mean, that was less than, 2 seconds, 3 seconds of a fix? And I'm not worried about, wasting a whole lot of time. And that seems a little big to me, so I'm going to shave it down. Get rid of that junk. Ear now looks too big. Let me place the ear back in real quick. It's just barely visible. Okay. Oh, by the way, Lashita's out, so no one's like watching the screen on the messaging. So I literally don't know what's going on, so I apologize if anyone's asking me questions or anything. I'm doing a very unpopular thing, apparently, on the internet here. I am not paying attention to the audience, I am paying attention to what I'm doing. Because I literally can't do two things at the same time. I've just made peace with that. Actually, let me get that. There we go, that's better. I made a boo-boo. jaw a little bit. It's kind of like sculpting a statue. Sometimes you just gotta chip chunks off. That's not bad. Okay, for anyone that doesn't know this, and I don't blame anybody who don't, it's a throat mic. I'm not sure the actual proper name for it. I actually like the fact that they put that in the show, even though they didn't depict the inside of a tank as being as loud as it actually is. The inside is so freakishly loud that they couldn't have microphones to talk into, to communicate to the other tanks and stuff, because it would just wipe them out, so they had these special ones that just sat on their necks, and it just recorded through the skin, through contact. And I think they also had some kind of, I think there may have been kinds where they had basically headphones, but there was also another kind which was a sound conductive speaker that they put on the skull so they could actually hear through the sound of the tanks. And it was just so loud inside of most tanks that they just couldn't really hear anything. I'm not saying that it never happened, but everything that I've heard is it's extremely loud inside those old tanks. I think instead of like the tank commander like yelling, "Go over that way" to the driver, he would, if I remember correctly, would just kick them in the shoulders. Go left, go right. Which I believe was actually in the show, where they would be, the commander would be like kicking the person, and the driver in the shoulders going like, no, that way, that way. So they didn't actually show the tanks accurately in that way, in the way that it's just all you could hear is engine and growling and crunching and creaking inside those things, which makes it awesome and probably amazingly unpleasant to be in. And I also don't know exactly what these throat mics go off of, so I'm going off of the real simple version they have in the little animation cell I'm looking at here. I'm probably getting it off. It's okay, I'm not going for accuracy, I'm going for fun this morning. Feels good to get back to an anime girl. I used to draw this kind of stuff all the time when I was younger. It's kind of more of a meditation to me at this point than anything else. Why aren't you drawing in anime style all the time? That's because I like too many things to just draw in one style anymore. I've found drawing in one style is a tendency of, I actually have a style that I draw in, but I find that just sticking to one gets a little boring, even my own. And then I'm sure if you guys were ever really bored and dissected all the drawings you've ever seen on here, you'd be like, oh, he always does this, always does that. Clearly I have a drawing style, but I don't know, sticking to one thing too much, kind of boring. Kind of amazingly boring. Yeah, actually, that's pretty good. Oh, I just started reading the screen. Hey Jay, it is almost always called a throat mic, although the actual name, I believe, or not, wow. Laryngophone? I'm not even going to say that. Pretend I didn't say that. That was probably very embarrassing on my part. I'm going to go with throat mic, because it's technical sounding and not like Latin sounding, which is Not where I want to be this morning. Don't want to be Latin-y. Anywho, thank you for joining me, Jay. All right, focus. I hate this camera. There we go, focus. Ha ha! Lum did her job. Okay. Everyone have yourself a good week. Thank you for joining me, Jay. And I kind of dig this one. I think this one was... She's not perfect. Actually, I think she needs one more line before I go out, because I just noticed that ain't round enough. There we go. That's what was bugging me. Aha! Bugging. All right, everyone have a good one. And thank you very much, man. And I will catch you all next week after I do the little Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood bit here. Oh, Lum. Lum almost escaped. Get back in there. There you go, Lum. There you go. Oh, yes. Pa! Boom. All right. Everyone have a good one. I will catch you next week.